Who remembers Stevie Ray Vaughan? Anybody? Texas rocker? Yeah, he wrote a great song called Tightrope, Walking the Tightrope. And basically, that's what we do every day when we work in the alcohol beverage industry. I mean, beer, alcohol has been part of our culture, part of our history for thousands of years. It's part of what we do. It's part of our economics. It's part about our business. It's ingrained in our culture. And we recognize that prohibition didn't work, and we adapted a regulated marketplace approach to alcohol beverages. And it worked pretty well. And it includes education. It includes outreach. And it basically helps bring alcohol to the marketplace in a safe and regulated way. And the reality is that we have the best regulated alcohol beverage industry in the world. What we do here in the U.S. brings choice, brings availability, brings selection, and brings it in a safe and regulated way when you look at how it's done around the world. And it is actually walking a tightrope. We have to walk the tightrope every day when we do this. And we do it well because we have policy forums like this where we can get together and talk about the issues, talk about the problems, and find good solutions to it. So I have a panel here of 3 people who are going to tell us what they do from an economic impact standpoint in the alcohol industry. And what we do is important, and it's important at every level. And each one of our panelists today bring expertise, bring experience to our industry. And their economic impact is going to run deep. They go throughout the economy. They work in the U.S. economy, they work in the Pennsylvania economy, they work down into our cities and into our communities. And so each business today here plays a vital role in bringing alcohol beverages to the marketplace in a safe and responsible way. And at the same time, these guys create jobs, they create economic impact, and they create tax revenue that helps fund the regulatory system that we work in. So basically, let me introduce, we have Chris Trogner from Trogner's Brewery. Tröegs Brewery. He's a brewer. Are you a brewer?
I'm not involved as much in the brewing process today.
You're all right.
Certainly a trained brewer and
yeah.
Many times over when we started out.
Great. We have Michael Gretz from Gretz Brewing Company and John Longacre from LPMG Partners, right? All right. I'm going to skip my part of the economic stuff. I'm going to save it for the end. I'm going to let each one of these guys set the stage for the economic impacts that they work on, and then I'm going to bring it all together at the end. I'm going to take a little different approach to the panel. So first I want to introduce Chris to the stage to tell us about his business and how he impacts the economy.
Okay, well, thanks for having me today. I'm going to tell a little bit about my story with Tröegs Brewing Company and how we got started and where we are today. And towards the end, also touch on some of the other brewers in Pennsylvania collectively and some studies that occurred a few years ago. So we are a very small, independently owned, family-owned brewery located in central Pennsylvania. My brother John and I started the brewery in 1997, and we had started out like a lot of other small breweries where it was just the 2 of us doing everything during the day, all the beer making and brewing, and in the evenings we'd go out and try to partner with local restaurants and retailers to try to sell our beer. Over the course of 18 years, as we would sell a little bit of beer, we'd invest very heavily back into our company to build our capacity and also to build our coworkers, to build our teams. Today we have about 182 people that work at our brewery, and last year we were listed number 44 out of the top 50 craft brewers in the United States, and we'll produce about 80,000 barrels of beer a year, which is very small in the scheme of beer making. Pennsylvania is a very important state to us. We try to keep things as close to home as possible, and we sell about 60% of our beer right here throughout the community. We also feel that it's very important to know where things come from and how things are made from a craft standpoint. And when we built our second brewery in Hershey, Pennsylvania, we tried to keep it as open and as transparent as possible. So as guests come through our brewery, they can learn a lot about the beer making process. And last year we have estimated that we had about 300,000 people visit our brewery with many of them being first-timers to come into the brewery. And we do track a lot of things at our brewery. We notice that most of our guests are coming from out of state. So we really do feel that the small brewery tourism is only gaining more and more interest. As I said, we're very small. We try to keep things very local. We primarily sell our beer in Pennsylvania, but we also do reach through 10 other states, from the New England region down through North Carolina. We also feel it's very, very important for us to have a positive impact in things that are going on day to day in our community, as do a lot of other small breweries throughout Pennsylvania. And we try to encourage everyone that works at the brewery, if they have an interest, a charity or a fundraiser, that we certainly will try to support them and their involvement, whether it's financially or also to have some physical support by offering additional hands. So as you can see, we've got quite a few of the typical things that we're involved in. Our financial commitments in the as the fundraiser can range, anywhere from a couple thousand to $50,000+ a year that we do. The other thing that I kind of glazed over that I should have mentioned, and building a brewery is extremely capital intensive. When we opened up very small with just a couple pieces of equipment. And as we were growing, when we'd invest in people, we'd also have to invest in equipment. And over the course of those 18 years, we have close to probably $30 million invested in our brewery. And over the next probably 2 to 3 years, we have close to 10 to 15 million of future investments made. And when we buy equipment, our equipment's made all over the United States, some in Pennsylvania, some overseas, but we always hire all of local contractors to do all the installation and setup of our equipment. As far as the impact of brewing in Pennsylvania, there's been 2 studies done, one by the Brewers Association, which is a national association, and the other by the Legislative Budget and Finance Committee in 2013. And I've only pulled out a couple different bullet points that you can see. With the Brewers Association in 2010 was estimating there was a $1.1 billion impact with the Pennsylvania brewers. That then almost doubled in 2012, and the number of breweries have grown from when we opened, which was about 36 in 1997, to close to 200 breweries actually today in 2014. The annual production from a craft brewery standpoint in Pennsylvania is the largest in the country, with about 4 million barrels of beer that's being produced. And as you can see in the Pennsylvania Legislative Budget and Finance Committee, that equates to about 60,000 jobs, or $2.2 billion in wages and benefits, and $365 million in state and local taxes that were generated from those jobs. Employment continues to grow about 10% each year, and the brewery payrolls, as they become more sophisticated, are growing about 31% each year. And as I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, the beer tourism among small breweries is very similar to a lot of the small wineries, where a lot of people are interested to see who's brewing the beer and how it's made, and are generating about 2 million tourists each year, with capital expenditures about $305 million contributed from that tourism. Also, the investment made among all the brewers in Pennsylvania has exceeded about $782 million since 2007. So a lot's going back into the commerce.
Gretz Beer Company is, our family's been in the business for quite some time. We were actually brewers back in 1881. My great-grandfather was a German immigrant whose trade was brewing. And the William Gretz Brewing Company was 1881 all the way up to 1964, when it sold out to, 61, when it sold out to another Philadelphia area brewer, which was Esslinger. But at its peak, the William Gretz Brewing Company was one of the top regional beers. They didn't call them craft beers back then, but it was a regional brewer. and with a 5 share and 250,000 barrels. So it was a fairly large regional brewery. Here's the smokestack. Is still a landmark in Philadelphia. It's right next to the pizza shop there. It's a great combo. Kidding. The brewery has not been active and sits there kind of idle today. So it's an incredible transformation when we look at the beer business and say, oh my gosh, it was back in the 1800s, in the early 1900s, over 60 brewers in southeast Pennsylvania alone. And we have this wonderful transformation recently that is about craft beer. So we, as Gretz Beer Company, have almost 30 suppliers, including my good friend Chris Trogner and his wonderful brands in our portfolio. My brothers and I operate out of 2 warehouses, one in Hatfield and one in Doylestown, doing 4 counties in southeastern Pennsylvania with 125 employees and over 5 million cases of beer. We just recently had to move to a new facility I mentioned in Hatfield. This is our 340,000 square foot warehouse. It was a vacant building, an old elevator plant sitting idle for many years. Renovated it, spent a lot of money building this brewery. It's now one of the most state-of-the-art distribution facilities in the country, and also one of the greenest. So we're one of the largest installations of LED lighting. This time next year, we'll have 85 to 90% of our energy coming from solar. And obviously major green initiatives with recycling and solid waste recovery. Here's a before and after. The left shot is, that's the keg room at the William Gretz Brewing Company. And to the right is the new keg room at the Gretz Beer Company. And I look at that picture on the left, I think of 2 words: workers' comp. That was hand stacked back in the 1800s. You've got to be kidding. Anyway, it was a different way of doing business. Today we have over 1,200 SKUs. You know, this is a remarkable number for a distribution center. We talk about at the core of it being a logistics company and distribution company. That's a 4-fold increase from just 5 years ago. So we talk about this wonderful element of craft beer that we all know about in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is one of the top craft centers, craft beer centers for the country. And I think we've gotten there because we've been very craft friendly. We have a system that's independent. We have distributors who are making the investment to bring these SKUs into the market and getting them in front of our consumers and making the product available. So you can see here some shots from our warehouse. This is just one of our pick lines, all voice pick. There's our drive-through. All the trucks come in for inside loading. It's remarkable. Just talking about one thing that happened to be a fairly recent phenomenon with a liquor board doing an interpretation of the law allowing for 12 packs at beer distributors. So that single interpretation required a monumental effort on every distributor in the state to say, okay, your package mix is going to change overnight. So every consumer and every retailer say, well, instead of a full case, I'd like to have not just a full case, but a full case and 12 packs available. So a remarkable challenge for brewers such as Chris and retailers such as John to say, okay, or beer distributors to say, we have a whole new package mix to carry on our floors and we want it today. So that is logistically a nightmare. But in addition to the logistics and the just distribution fundamental part of our business, we're brand builders. So my job as a partner with Chris is to say, I want everybody to try Tröegs in the market. I want people to taste the brands and understand why that brand is special. So it becomes, incumbent upon us to do that for our retailers, to train them, and we think we're very good at it. We've been recognized nationally. We received a very distinguished award at the Great American Beer Festival. That is the craft recognition as being one of the top craft distributors in the country. We're the second largest victory in Tröegs Wholesaler. We want to be #1. We will be there, Chris. Give me a little time. But we are #1 in the country for brands like Rolling Rock. Anheuser-Busch product, Pennsylvania origin, and Landshark, number one in the country for that. We've been recognized by Anheuser-Busch as being one of the top wholesalers in the country for distribution attainment and growth of brands. What does it involve? It involves obviously the logistics as we talked about. It also involves training. We have got a very complex market right now with a lot of different products out there, and we as a company better to be able to speak to every brand, every style, and talk about the relevance of it to each account. So our training is nonstop. It's on the first day of employment, and it never really ends. So going to the breweries, training our employees to be understanding what the messages are that brewers like Chris try to convey to the retailers and to the consumer. The retailers are a very important element of it. Number one, they all need to understand why a certain brand or certain beer or style is relevant to their operation, and that's for our people to talk to them. They obviously make the ultimate decision about what brands they carry, but that's really the crux of it. The consumer won't be able to buy it without the retailer featuring it and actually being able to talk about it as well. So we host retailer training in our new facility. We just had 100 retailers in our warehouse last week doing a internet marketing, social media training program, also brand and style training. So those types of training programs are ongoing. The consumer is obviously the end product here. Nothing sells without the consumer's understanding of what a product is, why I should try that beer, what their favorite beer might, or why they might like their favorite beer, whether it's the hops, the yeast, whatever it might be. So samplings are a part of our DNA every single week, as well as festivals, that type of program that we have our team out every day training and educating the consumer. You can find out more about us at thegreatestbeersoftheworld.com or gretzbeer.com. Talked about some of the events. Every single weekend we have festivals, most of them charitable events, but and to be honest with you, most of them were the primary and sometimes the only major sponsor to make sure that they are successful. The two final things I'll wrap up with have to do with responsibility and community. So you just heard the first panel. Responsibility is integral, and we are constantly looking for the right programs to get in front of our retailers and the consumers to help with those decisions. And you know, when there's issues, well, first of all, how to avoid the issues, but if there are, then how to deal with it properly. One program we do a lot of ramp training. This is endorsed by the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board. It is about responsible alcohol management programs. Every single retailer in our market is offered free ramp training anytime they want to come to our facility, and we will pay 100% for that training. It's a very important part of what we do, and it's a great program, and it really helps retailers make sure they have the most advanced training regarding alcohol management. There's Nancy Eliason, who's our primary trainer. And we'll also put it out into the press. So we want people to know these programs are available and which accounts have participated. We think it's important for people to know that. Designated driver is another program we do. All of our festivals have designated driver booths. This happened to be one at the Reading Beer Fest. So people need to know there's decisions you can make. If you're going to have beers, have somebody else drive. Who's that responsible driver? So whether it's our taverns or whether it's our festivals, bring a designated driver. Elements include training or table tent programs, point of sale material that's available for our retailers. Excuse me. Operation ID, obviously it starts with selling to people who are of age, and all of our retailers are supplied material to make sure that the consumer walking in understands we ID, including driver's license books for every single one of our retailers. Community is a primary fabric of our company. It's been from day one with my dad, who really kind of led the way in this. One of our primary partners is the 9/11, I'm sorry, it's the Travis Manion Foundation, but we were the first sponsor of the 9/11 Heroes Run, which is now over 60 races globally, named after my nephew, Travis Manion, who gave his life in Iraq, and the foundation named it his honor, is doing great work with military families who have lost family members or have had individuals wounded in action. Our local race in Norristown, that was 2 years ago, raised $32,000. Last year was $30,000 for the Heroes Fund and the Brad Fox Family Fund. So this is about giving back into our community. Additional charities are extensive, and I think I could speak for a lot of people in the industry. When somebody comes into us with an issue for the community, we're in. The answer is yes. The question is how deep can we go? But and I know I speak for the brewers of the world that we deal with and the retailers, that this is a big part of what we are and why we're so important into the community. Industry involvement, obviously we think events like this and be participating in solutions for the industry extremely important. We have to be educated ourselves. So when we work with guys like Jerry and the Center for Alcohol Policy, these are not always, as a matter of fact, they're very rarely easy answers. But to be honest with you, when we deal with it and the solutions and the issues together, we come up with better solutions for our community. And we're all members of the community. So what makes Gretz Beer so special? Well, it's our people. We have a remarkable team, 125 people and growing, and we're all passionate. So we love the beer business, we love what we do, and proud to be part of the beer business since 1881.
Hello, my name's John Longacre. I own a company called LPMG Companies in Philadelphia. I'm not going to talk too much about our company or the compliance side or charity or any of that. I'm going to talk primarily about economic impact of what we do and how we've been able to affect our immediate market through retail beer sales. My company is a real estate investment company, and although we are retailers of alcohol, that's not our primary business unit. We actually use alcohol sales as a way to create economic stability and revitalization in urban pockets around the city, in urban centers that suffer from disinvestment. And we've been very successful in our approach. It's very unusual. I think it maybe could only work in our market because we know it so well and understand it. But it definitely is not the usual textbook way of running a business. We own several retail stores, bars, restaurants, South Philadelphia Taproom, American Sardine Bar, Ultimo Brew, Notting Head Brew Pub, Calkins Creek Vineyard, and we operate them in neighborhoods that they probably should not be in. And we do it in an economic sense. This is just a small case study for you, but we took a little area in a very, very disinvested part of the city called Newbold. And that section right there in 2002 was listed on the Mayor's Neighborhood Transformation Initiative as one of the lowest rated neighborhoods in Philadelphia. The lowest income. It was trending downward on the NTI map. It was about as bad a rating as you could get in terms of a neighborhood in Philadelphia. We looked at it and we said, you know, this neighborhood has a lot of economic assets in physical assets, transportation, proximity to the central business district, access to public transportation, significant investments, hospitals, stadiums, multiple commercial corridors, proximity to big box shopping. It had all these things, but yet the neighborhood was a mess. I mean, it was filthy, abandoned buildings, non-conforming landlords, trash, no businesses, no amenity-based services. So we look at that area that has an extremely low asset value and we say, how can we fix this? And this was kind of something that we learned over the years, experimentation. That's a larger section that gives you, just a larger picture of the same area that gives you more of a block knowledge. Now, this little area did have some civic overlay. Point Breeze is a larger area. And the only reason I say that is because Newbold and Point Breeze both had about the same economic, socioeconomic relevance. We look at age distribution, we look at median household income, and again, this area ranked the lowest in the city. We look at police districts, civic overlays. I mean, we take an economic approach to this. This is something that's also very significant. We also look at amenity-based businesses in the area. So as you can see, when we did this study was done in 2004. There wasn't really much in the area by way of retail services or amenity-based services, which is partially why we do what we do. So we brought gastropubs to the area, areas, you know, businesses and restaurants that sell craft beer, really, really good food. Our restaurants ranked among the highest in the Philadelphia Magazine, rated us #2 and #4 in the city. Our coffee shop, Bottle Shop, was rated #1 in the United States of America. And it's not a pat on the back, but the relevance of that is very, very significant because these businesses are thriving and doing ridiculous numbers in neighborhoods that were absolutely blown out, with the lowest rated income distributions that were in the entire city. Housing stock, owner occupancy, let's see here, directional, okay, so this is very, very important to us. Trade area, because when we go into these neighborhoods, we're not really able to determine, clearly the neighborhood can't really support what we're doing there. So from an economic standpoint. So we have to be able to pull from other areas. So we really have to understand where we're at. The pockets that we go in are in and around the central business district. So they're close or relatively close to neighborhoods that have different demographics, different socioeconomics. And we hope to be able to pull from them as an operator. I'm happy to report that in this area that we started in 2002, that had the lowest ranking of the Mayor's Neighborhood Transportation Initiative, after 6 years of us being there, CNN reported we had the highest appreciating zip code in the United States of America. And it was based absolutely primarily on the development that we were doing there. The interesting part is, it wasn't just the restaurants, and that's where the other side of our company comes in. The residential infill piece we do after we have established businesses. Because, you know, in the plainest sense, I always talk to this fact that people want to live near cool stuff. So if we go into a neighborhood and we put a good gastropub and a coffee shop and a produce store, amenity-based businesses that people want, we can do the residential infill after, and the socioeconomic impact is so much greater than the dollars invested in those individual businesses. So we can build 100 houses, and it will not have anywhere near the overall socioeconomic impact of one very cool, very busy restaurant or gastropub. It simply doesn't have the same effect. Now, in that same area, I'll tell you, we just sold out the city's largest platinum LEED certified residential community. That's unheard of. Even I was shocked that we were able to do that. The dollar value per square foot that we got for these homes could never, ever, ever, ever have happened without the impact of the restaurants and coffee shops and bottle shops that we put in. What it does is it brings a set of eyes to a neighborhood that wouldn't be there otherwise. It brings a population into the neighborhood that would never, never, ever, ever come down to that corner. And it creates an opportunity for first-time buyers with very, very low asset values compared to the surrounding neighborhoods. So just to give you a visual perspective of some of the things we do, when we bought the South Philadelphia Taproom in 2002, and when I say we, I mean my company, we're 165 employees that would absolutely never be that size without the restaurant operations. But when we bought the South Philadelphia Taproom in 2002, it was, I mean, as bad as it gets, in a terrible neighborhood. high crime rates, trash everywhere, no civic activity whatsoever. We turned it into this, which was last year Philadelphia Magazine rated the fourth best bar in Philadelphia, and we made the top 50 restaurant list for the first time. That took us a little longer. The inside of the tap room looked like that. Now it looks like that. Look like that. Now it looks like that. There's a cask of Tröegs Dreamweaver right there. American Sardine Bar, very, very similar. Now the American Sardine Bar is an even more interesting study, because this place, the last year it was open, had 238 documented police incidents. A murder? I mean, it was absolutely as bad as it gets. Interestingly enough, the police captain for this area, Captain Washington of the 17th Police District, wrote a letter to the LCB, to Anna Verna, probably to Senator McElhaney, to everybody under the sun that had anything to do with liquor policy in Pennsylvania, begging them not to allow us to open this because of the crime and the shootings and the empirically based documentation of how bad this place is. 1 year later, we needed zoning to open up a beer garden in the backyard, an outside beer garden. He wrote a letter to the same group of people saying, please allow them to open the beer garden in the backyard because it has been such a tremendous asset to the neighborhood. We turned it into this. This place is just mind-boggling to me. It does so much business. There's no crime whatsoever. Interestingly enough, the rear yard where the beer garden was used to be a really, really heavily trafficked crime corner with drug dealing. And the minute we opened that beer garden, went away. Zero. Zero drugs, zero crime. We've had 0 police incidents in 4 years of being open. That was the interior of the American Sardine Bar. That's the interior now. That was the upstairs. That's the upstairs now. Our latest experiment, and this is probably the most controversial, is Ultimo Brew. Okay, this was the #1 rated coffee shop in America. I am not the owner of the coffee shop. I own the bottle shop within it, and I own the building. This was a disaster. This was the original DeBruno Brothers building in Philadelphia. It was at one time it was a great business on that corner, and it had been vacant for 27 years when we got it. We turned it into Ultimo Brew, and again, very, very, very successful corner now. So this is probably the most controversial thing we've done. This is on a 30,000 square foot lot in a really, really disinvested section of the city. It doesn't have all of the economic characteristics that we really look for, but it has many of them. This area, it looks really, really scary, but it's predominantly just vacant. What we do is infill. We get labeled as gentrifiers in many instances, and I guess to some degree that's true, but we only do infill development. We don't buy apartment buildings with people living in them, raise the rent, and kick them out. We don't buy homes that people are gonna lose their money, tear them down, and build new homes. We only do infill development, either abandoned buildings, vacant lots, etc. So this lot is one of them. We cleaned up 30 357 Magnum shell casings, probably 500 drug bags, a colostomy bag. I mean, you name it, that lot was as bad as it gets in the most disinvested section of the city. This is what it is now. It's a beer garden that has food and art shows and free yoga classes and food trucks, revolving food trucks, and it's been incredibly successful. Believe it or not, there are some legislators that have a problem with this in Pennsylvania. We got held up by one of them who mandated a community meeting, I guess for purely political reasons, that 300 angry customers were, 300 angry people were at screaming and yelling. They're really yelling about the gentrification factor. And by doing it on the backs of, we don't want the children to see the beer, is really hiding the real issue, which are legitimate, genuine concerns that need to be addressed. But this legislator just felt it necessary to have a community meeting so he can be political. But nonetheless, this thing has just been an unbelievable success. I'm happy to report 0 police incidents. It's it's been wildly successful on the back of craft beer and beer sales in Philadelphia. And this lot is bringing a whole new population, a whole new set of eyes on a blown out area of the city. And now those people are saying, hey, you know what, this area is not so bad. And I'm happy to tell you also that 95% of the 300 people that were screaming and yelling at me were at the beer garden drinking beer and eating last weekend. Absolutely no issues whatsoever. So, you know, I don't think that we would be able to do anything that we do from the residential side without the restaurants, without the craft beer model, without the coffee shops. And I mean, to be able to manipulate an increase in asset value, #1 in the country, in the entire United States of America, is very, very, very significant. And we did that based purely on the back of beer sales in those areas. So that's all I got for you. Thank you very much.
Wow, what'd I say? You guys didn't need any supply and demand curves out of me to get that thing started. So just let me summarize real quick. We got 3 businesses here. I think we got 182, 125, and you said, John, I think 165 people working with you. So maybe close to 400 people employed working just with these 3 businesses alone. And if you look across the state of Pennsylvania and you look at the economic impacts that come out just out of the job counts, what we like to do is break it down to beer, wine, and spirits in total. If you look at the brewing, distilling, and vintner tier, which I have as a manufacturer, we got almost 4,000 people working in that tier. Wholesaling, over 5,000. Retailing, over 70,000. Total direct jobs, 78,000. And below that is all the economic activity that comes out of having those jobs. When John, you know, redevelops a retail establishment, he brings in carpenters, he brings in plumbers, he brings in electricians, he brings in contractors. All those indirect and induced jobs come out of the activity. When the Gretz Beer Company builds a warehouse, all those indirect and induced jobs come out of it. And when Chris hires a contractor to come in and help expand his brewery, all the indirect and induced jobs come out of it. Overall, you're looking at over 133,000 people working in the state of Pennsylvania in the alcohol beverage space. If you look at the over 6 million people, you're looking at close to 2% of the state jobs just out of the alcohol beverage industry, and it doesn't include all the regulatory and all the additional jobs that come out of it on the government side. And in terms of the economic impact, $16 billion industry that we have. Once again, you can work through the 3 tiers of the industry, from manufacturer, from the brewer, the distributor, the retailer, and then all the extra impacts that come out of it. You're looking at a $16 billion industry. 2.5% of gross state product in the state of Pennsylvania. It's a powerful industry. Once again, it's a tightrope though, and when we work between the balance of public health, public policy, regulatory, and the economics, it is a tightrope that we walk every day, but it has significant impact to basically forming an alcohol beverage industry that is safe, regulated, and what we call an orderly market. And finally, it's the tax base that we all generate across the board. If you just look at the alcohol beverage taxes across beer, wine, and spirits, we're looking at over $3 billion of federal, state, and local taxes that get generated. They're generated at the business level. When you pay your FUTA tax, your SUTA tax, your federal unemployment tax, your state unemployment tax, your FICA, and your Medicare taxes, all those business taxes, the leases, the licensing fees and the property taxes all fall into over almost $2 billion worth of taxes that we generate. And then you come down to the consumer side, where the consumer's down paying federal excise taxes, state excise taxes, and state sales taxes and state excise taxes, and then all the special on-premise taxes, hotel taxes, and things like that that roll up. Basically, it comes to almost $3 billion spread across the wine, beer, and spirits industry. So it's a powerful industry, and it has significant impacts across the board. So that's our panel. I'd like to thank these 3 guys for coming up and telling their story. And does anyone have any questions? Come on, give me a question. Chris, do you want to? Oh, I saw a hand. Yes, go right ahead.
This question's for John. I actually live in the Newbold area, so it's fascinating popular thing has been beer gardens, but I've heard that there's been some challenges and issues with how, I mean, obviously liquor license in Philadelphia are expensive, but there's been some challenges with the beer gardens as well. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, the challenges are based primarily, as I understand it, from an enforcement perspective. And I can tell you this, though, the LCB has done a really, really good job at, you know, crossing the T's and dotting the I's in terms of what is allowed and what isn't. Just from a year ago, there was a lot of gray areas, and there's a lot less gray areas now. There's a very, very strict Board of Health standard now that is clearly defined within the city limits. I'm not really sure how it works outside of the city, but within the city limits. They actually used our plan as their model for moving all beer gardens forward in the city. The angst comes from the regulation part, and I guess maybe even to some degree that's the problem that we've encountered. The neighborhood that we went in on the Point Breeze pop-up is afraid of change, or should I say the residents that protested us are afraid of change. And they felt that there was no real process or community input in terms of opening that beer garden. And they're right, there wasn't. I didn't need to get a single community member to approve it. But I did that anyway. I went to our council person, I went to our local RCO, I had a stakeholder meeting. I went beyond what was necessary, and yet they still protested. So in most areas in the city, it's a welcome addition to the neighborhood because it brings a lot of traffic. People love being outside and drinking. In this particular instance, it was not necessarily welcomed by the immediate community. Now, what I found is that all of the neighbors around that beer garden are telling me that it's amazing, that it's quieter with us there than it was without us there. The lighting and cameras that we installed lighting and cameras in that beer garden, which we didn't have to. We did it by virtue of what the stakeholders wanted. So we did that to kind of ease some community concerns. And the immediate neighbors now are telling us that it's fantastic with us there. And it's quieter, it's safer, and the lights are on at nighttime. There's been no drug activity, there's been no crime. So I guess the enforcement part, it's always an issue, particularly with e-licenses, and the LCB doesn't really have an enforcement procedure that I'm aware of in enforcing these beer gardens. I know that there's a significant compliance standard to get there, but once it's open, it's open. And there is a lack of community input, and there's no after enforcement. So that's primarily what all the hoopla has been about.
Any other questions? You guys have anything you want to add to the closure here? No?
Keep drinking beer.
Yeah, just one thing to add from a brewer's perspective. When we look at our business, we're really running two separate operations. We have our food and beverage, or our retail operation, which does kind of mirror a lot what Mike Gretz said with as far as the ramp and tips certification and training that everybody goes through that's handling beer from a retail standpoint. From a brewery standpoint, we're really a food manufacturer, so a lot of our business is broken up into highly skilled positions, which could be our maintenance department, which has to have a pretty intense engineering background, through brewing, which there's plenty of 2 to 4 year brewing schools that a lot of our brewers go through, and also quality control. Beer's complicated, there's a lot of chemistry that's involved, and a lot of microbiology and chemistry that we have to watch from raw ingredient through finished beer. So there's a lot of different hands that touch the whole brewing process, from grains coming in to bottle that's leaving the brewery.
Well, on behalf of the Center for Alcohol Policy and the staff, David Chrisman and Danielle Duchesne, we'd like to thank you for coming and sharing this morning with us. We hope that the panels have been informative. Well, I actually learned a lot myself on this last one here. That's great. And I just wanted to remind everybody that we do have a sign up for our email blast, our sort of e-news blasts that go out frequently, and there's lots of literature out there, and we love to have you take some and learn more about what we're doing at the Center for Alcohol Policy. So with that, we want to thank you for being here, and thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.